All right, call meeting to order. Yeah, there we go. Call the meeting to order. First on our agenda, we're gonna, consideration to approve the minutes. All in favor of the minutes? Motion?
So moved.
All approved? Say aye. Aye.
Sorry, aye.
No nays.
Trying to make peace with this machine.
Motion carried. Next on our agenda, the review the report transportation of charter schools. Did everybody get a chance to look at those? No, okay.
Ms. Perry's here.
Okay. Oh, here we go. All right.
With permission of the chair, I'd like to share some data that's not in your packet about the transportation and explain a little bit about what you do have in the agenda packet this evening. First of all, I was asked to look at transportation. What open enrollment charter schools provide transportation? And when I took a look at that, I really did not have any idea. I had not collected that data before. We hadn't really looked at that data. But what we found was that this is information that came in their original charter applications. There are 24 open enrollment charters operating today, and this is what came in their original application. 4 indicated they would provide bus passes to students. 3 indicated that they would provide transportation via school buses, and 1 indicated that they would provide both bus and public transportation. Now, let me say, I said in their original applications, it could have come to us in an amendment process, it could have come to us in a renewal application, or it could have been something that was promised verbally to one of the authorizing groups that oversee the charters. So that is actually 33.33% of the open enrollment charters who've indicated to us that they are providing transportation. Again, that was 8 of 24. 7 other charters indicated that there would be a possibility of transportation in the future. They didn't plan to have transportation when they first opened, but they indicated if they saw a need, that some type of transportation would be considered for the future. And that was an additional 7 of 24, so that's 37.5% of charters, leaving you with approximately 70, a little bit more than 70.8% right now that may be providing transportation today. There were 7 of 24 that indicated no transportation. When you consider that 2 of the 24 are complete virtual programs, and if you use the denominator of 22 rather than 9, there would obviously be even more charters there. So we didn't have the data that we thought we really wanted and needed, so survey instruments have gone out, and that's what you have. You have 2 survey instruments in your packet. One went to charters that said they are providing transportation. And that one just asked, anything changed there? How's transportation provided now? Because we think they may have switched or added some methods of transportation that we want to know about, and we don't have any idea how many students would be utilizing it, so we've asked for a number of students so we can get that information. If they're not offering transportation, for the one that are not offering it now, would they be offering it in 5 years? The other, the one for the schools that are offering transportation is very similar, but again, it asks for how are they now doing it, has it changed from how you originally said you were going to do it, and then how many students are utilizing it. And of course, in both places, there is a way for them to leave us comments about the transportation. We anticipate having this data back in a little bit, approximately 2 weeks from the end of last week, and we'll be compiling it and we'll get it sent out to you when we have that information from these surveys. We think that'll be very interesting data.
The 24 open enrollment charters, that's statewide? Or is
Yes,
that-
sir.
That's statewide. Let me just point out that bus passes mean you're providing some people with some
That's right,
transportation.
absolutely.
Because not everybody lives on a bus route
That's
or
right.
with walking distance, and not all schools are located on bus routes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's why we want to get all the information and see maybe some of those bus route passes have changed and not met the needs of all students. Maybe they are meeting the needs of some students. So we'll see
And
what we
it-
get from that.
It is up to the individual charter schools to provide that transportation, correct?
Yes, sir. It's an individual, on an individual basis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Did y'all have? No.
Well, just to point out, and I think we've talked about this before, the reason that transportation is important, and it goes hand in hand with location of schools and communities and the possible creation of opportunity deserts in parts of the community that are might also be otherwise disenfranchised. So that's the important part of it.
Okay. Ms. Marshall?
One other question just occurred to me. When children are given bus passes, is that with the city system? I apologize for making you come back up.
Again, Mary Perry, Division of Learning Services. Typically, all we know is it's public passes. And you'll find those, of course, more often in the schools that are up the upper grade levels with the bus
Okay.
passes.
All right, thank you. Just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
Any other questions? Dr. Barton, how are you, sir? Next on the agenda, our work session for consideration of the recommendations to the state board. And we tabled a little bit of this discussion from the last time to allow other board members to have some input on this, because I dare not send this up and then not get the input from the whole team on this. So anybody want to add anything on that?
Let me just ask if everybody's had an opportunity to, I know I'm still writing on a few things, but
We may have to table it again, just for Mr. Phillips, Ms. Retta, or if we could send them out something. I know we've already did that.
Antoine's already added his.
Yeah, okay.
And I've added mine.
Ms. Very.
Sorry. This is awkward. Here we go. I think we could probably start going through and making any edits to, at least to the history that Jim put together. I know Tamika made a couple of comments about the number of schools.
Yeah,
I mean,
6.
those are things, simple things that we could
Okay.
correct and agree on now and kind of get out of the way. And then there were some other questions about dates, and we may have access to that while we're all sitting at the table, and we can all put it in there and plug it in and
Awesome.
knock that out.
One of the things that I want to make clear, this is the way I've always written and the way that I've taught writing, and I mentioned the brain dump, and that's exactly what I did. It's not in any kind of organization that is not malleable. I want it to be sure that I'm not wed to any order. The order, I think, is I put in some explanatory, prefatory notes, was what occurred to me, and then as I massaged my thoughts, they seem to flow in that order and lend themselves to the specific, just working topics, titles that I had given them. It's just to get my thoughts out. And Jim, am I correct that you're sort of the organizational, that you pulled that short straw?
I think I did.
I'm so glad you did. But I think that initially, it's just really important to not be quite so concerned about form, just to get the ideas out there so that we can talk about them and then go from there. I think it's important, and I'm grateful when you catch things, and I go back and think, oh, I'm supposed to have been a professional editor. How did I miss these little mistakes? But that's going to happen to us.
Let me say something about timing. I know we were originally on a December deadline because there was some hope in the original motion that what we recommended would inform the Charter Authorizing Committee and the Board of Education. Since our charge changed markedly to just focus on collaboration, then I think that the urgency, I don't see any of those recommendations impacting any imminent decisions at the Board of Education. I am a little bit reluctant to put anything out to the public in draft form or comment prior to the Little Rock School District bond election in May, just because I don't think anything that we say on one side or the other or could be taken or misconstrued, or we just I don't think need to be in that mix of stuff. So I just wanted to offer that up.
Yeah, I think I was clear about my concerns about timing as well.
I did speak with the chair, Maria Reith, today, and she is hoping that there will be a report to the state board, either a progress report or the final report at the June meeting.
Okay. So we'll start putting that together.
There you go.
So Jim, with that concern, are you suggesting that maybe we don't take the time right now to go through the report, or that we continue to whittle away and then present something in May?
I think it whatever y'all feel like doing, if there's something productive that we can do this evening that can help, define stuff, if there are any of the items that have been jotted down that anybody disagrees with, for example, or has a different take on, then that would be good to know before I start trying to piece all this stuff, knit all this stuff together.
One thing that I would recommend to everybody, and I don't, is that if you can take the time to read the SERPI reports, it's so hard for me to say SERPI. I would really encourage everyone to do that. I have a concern about being a very process-oriented person and having worked in so many different positions on helping schools to form collaborations. I have my own, of course, view about process, and the SERPI reports about, initially it was the herding cats, and then they based their bridging the divide upon that one. And they have lots of, I think, very valid observations and important suggestions. My criticism was, well, I think you still got to get down to step-by-step process for bringing people together. And so one of the addendums I had indicated that I would make is the process that I've always used and found to be very successful. My overall concern is that the schools have been encouraged to be competitors, and that's going to be very, very difficult paradigm to shift. It's like sleeping with the enemy. Not that I think that they are the enemy, but I think that it's going to be much more challenging because of the history there.
I think think I commented on what you wrote about that concern, saying that may be why your thoughts, which I thought were great, by the way. I read everything you wrote, and I made some comments on where they might get plugged in under which category, which would be a collaboration, which would require policy change, and I was probably wrong on a lot of it. But I think that observation about that paradigm shift should come at the beginning, right after Jim's summary of the history, a discussion about the difficulty that collaboration poses to the groups. I think that's the perfect place for that discussion. I think it's incredibly relevant.
Yeah, that's going to have to be something that takes all of us in this community and really in this state to work. Once you have defined people by virtue of competition, that's like asking Walmart to get cuddly with Target. And I don't think that that's realistic. But I don't think that it's at all impossible for almost anybody to learn how to work together if you keep your eyes on a prize that you both agree is worth working toward. And what I think we all believe is that excellence in education for all children is what we want. That's what we're after. But the big question is, how is it that we achieve that goal? First of all, are we going to agree on that goal? And those are really, really big goals. My experience in helping to facilitate collaborations is, first of all, you got to learn how to talk to each other. And I don't think our schools even do a very consistent job of doing that. One of the suggestions that I had made was, let's find out how comfortable the traditional schools and the charter schools are in just talking among themselves. When I was working closely with schools, and part of a school, how we communicated was in the teacher's lounge, which when I was managing volunteers, I said, please stay out of there. You're going to hear things that you shouldn't. Or in the faculty meeting, which was maybe once a month, and we generally heard from someone from on high. And we really, as a school staff, weren't that schooled or comfortable in working with one another, except perhaps as a department in the English department. And so I wonder, how we would find out. But that's one of my suggestions, is find out how comfortable the schools are with working collaboratively with others who aren't in the same location, because that's what we're going to be asking of people.
Let me share some of my thoughts about this, because I don't, to me, the categories that Dr. Barr suggested don't quite fit the paradigm that's in my mind. The first objective is clear, which is to do what the Board of Education asked us to do, cooperation, collaboration, and I thought the SERPI report had a lot of good information in it, including the warnings about trying to do this in a toxic political environment.
Yes.
And so I think that's a good place to mention that in terms of challenges. Later on in the report, they refer to the Cleveland plan. They recommend to build a strong coalition of citywide approach to education, which is, to me, what we were originally asked to do. I went back and reviewed the tapes of the public hearings on the ESTEM and Lisa Systems approval and all the testimony that happened there, Dr. Barth's original motion. And it seems to me that that's what we were asked to do originally, was to develop a strategic plan for all of public education in the southern part of the county. I think, unfortunately, that's a real missed opportunity. But if there were a community consensus about what we wanted public education to be, it would set the table for some collaboration that without that, it's going to be more difficult than piecemeal, I think.
And that's why that's one of my suggestions. As a matter of fact, I think it's important to do it countywide. But because I was writing that and thinking, yeah, that's going to ever happen. Probably not. Then I was reminded of times I've sat in the courtroom amazed when, or read a legal plea, lawyer friend over here. Well, here's what I want you to do, Judge. And they give you this, they offer this elaborate rationale for why their position is right. But then they get down to where, but if you don't buy that, in the alternative, would you go for this? And so that's why I've said, let's look at the big picture. But if you're not going to buy that, let's at least do it south of the river so that we are operating strategically. I'm concerned about consequences, unanticipated consequences, and setting precedents and impetuses behind directions that may be ultimately leading into a dead end or a brick wall.
Well, I think you have to do it at least initially countywide. Now, there makes it more difficult. There are a lot more communities of interest. But on the north side of the river, if ultimately decisions made to authorize Maumelle and Sherwood to split off, then PCSSD is gone.
Exactly.
And that impacts what happens on the south side of the river. There are opportunities, even if that happens on the north side, to do some innovative things like tax-based sharing. But I keep going back to what Dr. Guest said about the need for some stability so they could get their, once they've got their house in order, so they could start building on that firm foundation. And even if the future is changed, knowing what that change is going to be gives you something to build toward. And so I think your suggestion about doing it countywide is well taken.
And particularly to do it in conjunction with city decision makers. I have been, our neighborhood has been very much involved with the city board of directors, listening to all the conversations because of housing patterns that are developing in our part of town that are worrisome. And the consequences have been very distressing. And one of the things that has been apparent to us is the dearth of really thinking about one domino hitting another and a citywide plan. And I'm pretty sure I've heard you comment on that too, Jim, and you're certainly in a position to know. And we're all in this together. We need to be very much aware of our interconnectedness and think holistically about those connections and where the dominoes fall. And I guess part of this is having spent a lot of time in Southern California and having seen such enormous changes that are totally undoable because they're so large. We're still small enough that some of what may be construed as damage can be mitigated. But it's up to us to think down the road and with the potential consequences, not just for the county, but we're the precedent-setting county, and I've addressed that in the report as well. What goes in Little Rock can go elsewhere too. So really, all that I've written is been very candid, and so I want you to react. I want you to respond. I have not meant to be anything other than candid. This is the unvarnished me, and what is really important to me, which is making the best decision for the very, very most people, and making sure that goes way down to the very the lower echelon of our community. Raising everybody up is, I think, our moral obligation, and taking care of everybody. And Diane, one of the things that I would really welcome, because you are so well grounded in special education and looking through that lens as you're reading the ideas and then offering others. One of the things that the SERPI reports do stress has been successful is looking at how special education is being dispensed in all of the schools, and the parity of that, and the fact that so many charter schools don't have the resources that they need to make sure that they are educating those children, and the data that we've seen that tend to indicate that perhaps a lot of those children aren't being educated in the charter schools. So that's another issue that can be addressed in terms of some of the good advice in the survey report. But I think that you, of all of us, you have that insight that we don't have, and so I'm really looking forward to some of your ideas about that.
I didn't really expand on it, but my ideas around special education were pretty brief. You know, special education, whether it's a charter school or a traditional public school, technically speaking, it works the same way no matter where you are. So theoretically, there should be no difference to the approach for a student with a disability who's receiving special education and related services, whether they are in a traditional public school or in a public charter school. I think the issues that came to light with some of the reports that we saw from University of Arkansas, the two colleges who presented, were that students with the most significant disabilities, for whatever reason, were not enrolling in charter schools. So there was a disproportionality there, and the research around best practice in special education is that students with disabilities who have access to their general education peers do better, and that general education peers also have better outcomes when they have peers with disabilities, and everybody is in an inclusive setting that with shared responsibilities. I'm not so sure we do such a great job with that in traditional public schools, much less in public charter schools. I think that that's kind of a cultural issue, and I think we've been kind of slow to move in that direction. But the concerns that I had were addressed in the recommendations that I didn't expand on them, but I certainly can, around the disproportionality of students with significant support needs being enrolled in public charter schools. And so the recommendations were either if you're looking at an opportunity for collaboration, then some kind of printed guide that includes information about special education and some very concrete language, explaining to parents that it should work the same no matter where you are, and explaining to them that they should have access to the same options as anybody else, and a printed guide that would provide information about each option available. That was the recommendation for collaboration. The other recommendation was a centralized intake and registration process, which is what New Orleans had to end up doing because of the lawsuit that they experienced because of the same sorts of issues with special education students. So I can expand on that if you want to, but that was my main concern with special education.
Yeah. Just to make sure that you're satisfied with whatever we've got in that report to have addressed it.
I'm satisfied with the recommendations. I can provide some explanation around why that's necessary, and I can refer to there's some other documents. There is not a whole lot of peer-reviewed articles on this particular issue, the intersection of charters and traditional public schools. I looked for it, couldn't find it. SERPI is pretty much it. So I have read both of those reports. They had some really good recommendations. My only concern was that SERPI had some recommendations around special education that really I don't think reflect best practice in special education. They talked about, schools collaborating to pull students who receive special education into one campus. Right. That is a bad idea. And there's no way on God's green earth that I would allow that recommendation to move forward. It flies in the face of all of the research and all of the data on best practice for special education.
Yeah, I was surprised to read that.
Yeah.
Diana,
Yes,
when
sir.
you said a centralized intake, was that just for special ed students or for everybody?
For everybody. So that's what they did in New Orleans. It was primarily due to the result of the lawsuit, because what was happening was New Orleans kind of just completely blew up their district. I'm sure you read all that in the SERPI report. If you read some of the articles that have been written, I think it's in the Atlantic. I think there have been a couple of articles about what happened. What basically happened was when students who had significant support needs returned to New Orleans and were faced with enrolling in a school, there was no one place you went to enroll in a school. You presented to each school and filled out an application for each school, and there were some ungodly number, 14 different charter schools in this one parish. And so what was happening was students were filling out applications, trying to enroll in these charter schools, and the charters were telling them, we don't have the resources to serve you, go back to the public school, because the public school still existed, although it was much smaller. And that resulted in a lawsuit. I don't want us to go that way, obviously, but we do have reports of, I have received phone calls from families over the years who have, requested, who have attempted to enroll in a public charter school and have been told, we don't have the resources to serve you. And that can't happen. And Ms. Boyd said that. She said that should never happen. And she's right. So.
I think that one of the things that was being written about in the SERPI report was, areas of collaboration that have seemed to be working in a number of instances. And by the way, the allusion to the Boston Compact, that compact was started, and they said a third-party compact. That was started back in the late 1980s and the early 1990s as Partners in Education with business entities between the public schools and the businesses based on the National Association of Partners in Education process, which is one of the things I'm going to introduce to our document, just as, look at this as one model. There are a number of models, but I was pleased to see that they're apparently still alive and well and supporting collaboration. And I think I just forgot my point. Going off on that tangent, it'll float back in again in a minute. Sorry.
I think to be fair to the folks who wrote the SERPI report, when they referred to districts that were collaborating by, creating campuses and sort of pooling the resources for the special education students, I think that the issue that arises with so many small independent school districts, and that's in effect what a charter is you don't have the ability to take advantage of that economy of scale. And so when it comes to providing services to students who have a need for special education and related services, being able to pool your resources and sort of spread that out among all of your students is a big advantage. That's why so many small school districts around the state really struggle when they're presented with a whole lot of students who have a whole lot of support needs. The same goes for charter schools. I think that there's a way to pool resources throughout the region without busing kids to a separate campus. That's all I'm saying.
That sounds reasonable, and I thought that really at least one of the relationships seemed to be that they were just apportioning what was available to where it was needed, and that the reason that so many charters don't have these special needs children is because they don't have the money, because it costs more to take care of needs on an extreme level.
Well, so the
That's what they
funding for special education and related services flows in the same way to charter schools that it does to traditional public schools. So they receive a set amount per pupil from the state, and that budget is the special education budget for the district. But it's just like anything else. It's when you have, hundreds and hundreds of students, and you're able to pool all those resources, and you have let's say, 5% of your student population receives special education and related services, or let's say even 10%. That's probably closer to the mark. Not all of them require a whole lot of intensive support. Some of them require, a little bit of assistance. They have some specific learning disabilities. Some of them have significant support needs, but because you're able to pool all that money into one budget, you can then sort of meet the needs individually of each student. But if you have 100 students on a campus, even one student with a whole lot of support needs is going to throw off your special education budget, because the amount that's provided per pupil is, I've heard the estimate before, they estimate it's actually 17% of the federal special education money that's provided to the states to meet the requirements of the mandate in IDEA is somewhere along the lines of 17% of what's actually needed. And so that pooling of resources is absolutely necessary, because it is not enough to meet the needs.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Serpy was clear about, the report, was that they were talking largely about really large school districts. They're talking about Boston and Denver and Los Angeles, and of course we're much smaller.
I'll add information about the rationale for that,
Thank you.
recommendations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our sound person was saying, make sure we're talking to mics.
Oh. One of the features of the New Orleans arrangement with the common registration, I want to make clear that in my suggestion about making sure that there is a place for parents to get all of the information that they need, that I wasn't talking about taking on the process of registering or doing the lotteries for schools that use a lottery system. I didn't go into that. I suppose it would be possible, but it sounds to me like it would be extremely taxing to do that. But I do think that a centralized source of information and being able to get complete information on every single school and have some sort of a comparative tool. I always think in terms of sheets of paper, because that I'm used to reading them that way. But I do think that having a centralized, or at least a location, as well as probably a virtual online system too, to make sure that parents can navigate the information and registration system, is going to be really helpful to people beginning to see all the public schools perhaps as all the public schools. That means charters too.
Did you have something, Jim? Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Phillips?
Come here just cause problems, right? My only comment is I apologize for being late. I don't expect the board to rehash what I missed, but I have made comments in the document, so I'll just try to pick up where everyone else is.
I'm thinking, just to rehash where we've been.
You're gonna do it anyway.
You're
I'll do it
good,
anyway.
we'll later.
I can do it pretty quick. I think it's the general feeling that we shouldn't make any of our conclusions, even in draft form, public before the Little Rock School District bond election in May. We have a request to make either a progress report or have a final report for the June, what date in June do we have? Board of Education meeting. We wanted to make sure everybody got their comments, and I may be most derelict in that. I'm still working on trying to restructure.
The State Board meeting is June 8th, and all documents for the agenda must be received by May 26th
May 26th.
at the latest. I will accept them earlier.
Since you brought it up, Mr. McKenzie, what was the discussion regarding why we didn't want to make it public before May 9th?
Well, I can tell you, from my standpoint, it's going to be a contested election, and I don't think anything that we say should weigh in on it one way or another.
Or be construed.
Or be construed or misconstrued one way or another on. I've got my own personal feelings and my yard signs up in my yard already, but just from a, you know.
Can I
Is
ask
the progress- Oh, I'm sorry, Antoine.
No, you go first. I was late. I will defer to you.
Just, what would a progress report look like?
We're nearly finished.
End of sentence? Okay.
In the extent of being selfish, on our Google Doc, the commissioner responded to some of my proposed policies, and I didn't know if he had the opportunity. I just responded because I hadn't looked at it since you made your response. But a lot of the things that I included, I thought could be changes to the policies, and you indicated there would be changes to the law. I'm not putting you on the spot, but at some point, could you respond to let me know which ones may be in the department's purview and which one definitely will require a vote at the Capitol?
Johnny Key, Department of Education. I'd be glad to have our legal team look at those and separate which ones would be statutory changes from simple rule and reg or policy changes.
That's exactly what I'm asking. Thank you,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
I'm happy to.
Absolutely.
Dr. Barr had
Yeah, thanks. And, in my look at the draft, I mean, I think there is plenty of content here to work with. And I think it really is about reorganization, getting it right in that regard. But my sense is, although I know it's going to take a while for that editing process to take place, I think y'all are pretty close because there is a lot of material here. I think it would be certainly ideal if that June report could be your final report, and I would challenge you to get there. I know that it creates a timing challenge because of your preference that there be nothing made public before the 9th, but I do think that it's doable. Of course, I don't have to do it, but it is doable for y'all to get there, and it would be, I think, very much in the best interest of us really moving this conversation along for it to happen at that June meeting as part of a culminating report.
yes, sir.
Can I ask you, Dr. Barth, what typically happens with the board in July? Do you all ever take a month off? Do you
We
get
do.
summer break?
We do not take a break.
You never get a vacation.
Right. We may well have a change in leadership on the board, but it appears there will be no change in composition of the board. So there is not the usual. June, July is often a very big change because we lose members, and that's then a lot of getting folks up to speed. We don't have that same pressure this year, but I think in terms of kind of how we think about our years, they very much run from July to June, and so that is a natural kind of completion of the projects that have been begun over the previous years, and y'all's obviously started about the time that that the last year of our work began.
Thank you. I think having a final report by June, but I want to make it, I'm just going to be candid with everybody. My May is just shot. I've got things that I've put off and to take care of this because it's important to me. And
That's okay, you've given us everything, you've dumped your whole brain out, and we've
I
got it
did,
now.
I did.
so.
I did, and unfortunately, I thought of other things too, but there's got to be an end someplace.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I'd like to make a recommendation on the report. At the very beginning of the statement, you've said that the reason the state board took over the district, 7 members make that decision. Each one could have a different reason. So I will, if
Was
it's
it-
okay with you.
Financial distress, academic distress.
Well, academic distress is the final reason, but, and Dr. Barth, help me out here, but I think it would be appropriate to ask our accountability office to provide some really hard data about the number of schools in priority status, the number of schools in focus status, the number of schools in academic status, and the length of time some of those schools have been in those classifications without progress. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that it was a complex conversation, and I think just talking about 6 schools is a little under does not give the full picture. I think that's fair to say.
That's fine. The more information, better. That's why this is a draft.
I have a question and a comment to that. Question, when we say make the draft public in June, we're talking about public as it will be posted on the website and then discussed at the June State Board meeting? That's what we're referring to? And at that meeting, are we to be present? Is one of us going to present the report? Okay, did I miss that already?
We haven't talked about it.
Oh, okay. So we hadn't got there, so we can save that. Second point, there's a lot of history with the Little Rock School District as it relates to the takeover. So I don't know where we draw that line in saying, okay, here's where we start to talk about the condition that the district was in that led those 5 board members to make the decision they did. So I think it gets real dicey if we start to say, well, we're going to pick this point, and then it definitely was really bad then, and this is why they made their decision. So, and if we're going to make it public, as we all learned in school, shorter is always better. So I would be, to the extent we are voting, I would vote against adding
I was just about to.
more data and information to the report since we already pretty deep. If we get more history, we're adding another 3-4 pages of information that I don't know if it adds to the value of what we were supposed to be doing anyway.
If I can get the information, then perhaps I can summarize it more accurately without going into as much detail.
I concur. I think for one of the things that, as I was writing, I got sensitive to, gosh, not everybody understands where I'm coming from. I think it's important to be clear about where we started, but not the detailed background of where it is that we've started. I mean, we started with a commission, and so we're carrying out our commission.
So back to my first point, we're all expected to be at the June meeting, which is what date that I missed? June 8th.
So are we going to get together and discuss it at all before June
I hope so.
8th? Okay. I'm hoping.
Well, backing up the presentation, because all documents must be entered into the system 10 days prior, then I will need the report and any presentation by May 26th. So your meeting will need to occur before then.
So I guess we can pull our calendars now.
Ms. McKenzie, I sent you the list of presenters and the dates they presented.
Great.
I copied everyone, so.
Any dates that we should stay away from? May.
Let's start with finding one.
So it's a lot to stay away from, huh? Easier to find one first.
Let's just find one.
Is May 15th too late?
We better. That's not very much time.
I'm afraid I'm going to be in Florida the entire week of May the 15th.
You're afraid? You're upset about it?
Stay away from the alligators, Jim. We need you.
On the beach at Tampa Bay.
That's when he finished his best writing.
So what dates are those?
May 15th?
The whole week of the 15th. I'm
Oh,
out.
okay.
So we got 8/22nd, or either another day through the week.
So I presume that during the month, we're going to be looking at the document and shaping that up, responding to the organization, and whatever needs to be done among ourselves to get it to where it's a document that we can get together and talk about before we finalize it. Okay.
Now, the other question is, do we want to put a draft out for public comment before it goes to the Board of Education?
What's customary?
There's nothing customary about this group.
I'm not talking about it specifically. I'm talking about task forces reports.
Dr. Barth?
We're very unique, Ms. Kaufman. Thank you.
The question was, what is customary for putting out draft reports for public comment? And I said, this ad hoc committee is not customary.
Right.
But there've been other task forces, surely.
Yeah, but on this issue, I mean, we would normally receive this as a final report. I mean, y'all are the public in many ways in terms of bringing your insights to the board. And so I think in many ways y'all are playing that role as representatives of the public. So that would be my perspective. I don't think that, as with many other subcommittees and others, there is no public comment at all. So I think that if you really do want to do a June final report, then I think May 26th is your deadline.
Thank you.
How about we get together on the 22nd?
I will be out of town.
Are you afraid you're going to be in Florida too?
I'm afraid I'm going to be in Colorado that whole week. So, sorry.
Can you go email transition?
Yeah, I don't mind.
No, I'm saying for everyone to, once you do your finalization of that, just email it out to everybody.
Yeah, I'm accustomed to working on virtual teams, so I don't mind doing that. I don't have to. I enjoy seeing all of you, but I don't have to
That's for,
be here.
I guess that's for everyone. That way it makes it a little bit easier on the dates because, you know, would that be okay?
Yeah. One final question. Hopefully, we can come to a consensus about what we're going to recommend. But if we can't, if anybody, an individual disagrees strongly with a recommendation or has an additional recommendation that they feel strongly about that doesn't have consensus support, do we allow individual minority reports to be attached to the full report, or how do we want to proceed with that?
Any ideas?
Well, as a lawyer, when the court doesn't agree, there's dissenting opinions that are attached with the final opinion. So in that sense, I think that could be an easy thing someone could add. I wouldn't hope or think anyone's going to add 20 pages of something that didn't agree, but that may be a way to address that.
Does it look like we've got any points of really strong contention right at this juncture?
Well, the one of your recommendations that I would just want to discuss with you is the one about a moratorium on all new schools.
Oh, yeah, that's one of those, gee, wouldn't I love it things. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it should.
Ideally, I think that's right, but that's a case where the perfect's the enemy of the good, and I don't want to quite be there.
I'm willing to reword it. But like I said, I dumped what was in my brain,
Got it.
and that's what my brain told me we should have done a long time ago.
All right. So, Mr. McKenzie, when you get that, you just send it out to everybody, and then we'll correspond by email.
Can we still respond to the Google document
Yes.
that we have?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, definitely, everything, anything.
Any other questions, concerns?
So we're all being, as I understand, maybe this is a question for Dr. Barrs. This item will be on your June agenda, and I guess y'all will have discussion. And do you perceive some Q&A from the board, or how kind of, do you have any thoughts on how this may play out on June 8th?
Well, I would assume y'all would come with a presentation of the key highlights. The board will have received it in the packet 10 days before, and the board is really good about reading materials. So you can know that it will have been read. That said, I think especially for the broader public, it's important to think about a concise presentation. And then, there will be, I'm sure, questions and comments regarding the report, and then there, I think in all likelihood, the norm would be that there would be an acceptance of the report and a release of y'all from your duties, having carried out that charge, at least as it was amended across the months.
Okay. So I guess, who's going to present?
It would be the chairman.
That's what I'm just.
Well,
Unless you delegate it,
yeah.
unless you appoint your delegate.
I guess we'll talk about that later.
And y'all could certainly divvy it up and present different parts.
Okay.
That would be appropriate if it makes the most sense to the group.
Dr.
Thank
Barth, what time should that be on the agenda?
What's that?
What time?
What time?
Like at 10 o'clock or
Yeah, or 1.
1?
Yeah, our agenda is broken up. We're getting Ms. Kaufman has really led us to get better about so that folks don't sit around in this beautiful room all day. That there is a little more precision about when presentation, especially with something that where several of y'all might be here. We could almost have a set time for that, and so maybe the afternoon. It'll really depend on Ms. Reith and Ms. Kaufman to figure out the timing.
Do y'all have a preference, 10 a.m. or 1? Ian?
Morning works better for me, but I'll defer to the rest of the committee.
What's a good time for everyone else?
I'm retired, I can be there anytime.
Afternoons generally work better for me, but I'm perfectly capable of functioning in the mornings.
I'm not going to promise that I'll be functioning, really. It's just
You'll be there.
logistically, that's a better time for me. So.
You stand less time of waiting if you get the early slot.
10 o'clock.
Better, thanks for that. Hey, Antoine, are you planning on kind of rounding out some of your contribution to the draft?
I will round out, and I think it makes more sense for me not to round out at this point, since the commissioner has indicated that some of my suggestions may require law and some may fall within the purview of the AD. So once we get that information about which ones falls in the recommendation umbrella, then I'll kind of flesh it out some more. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing something and then we're like, oh,
Sure.
well, that requires legislation.
I don't think that we're barred from making recommendations that would require legislation. It's just that we just have to say that this is something that would require a legislative change. And that's the kind of thing that,
We might not know that.
well, Commissioner's going to find out for us, though.
Yes, they can. Yeah, that was my problem in trying to stick them in the right place. I'm really not well-grounded sufficiently. Well, one of the things that I did want to say that I think is important for us to do, although I put in, I had a lot to say because I had a lot to say, but I also wanted to make sure that I was clear about where I was coming from. I think it's important to have that kind of contextual expansion as appropriate, to make sure that we understand that, yes, this is a document to the board, which knows for sure what's going on, but it's also going to the public. And I think it's very important for us to be as specific as we need to be and as well-rounded as is also going to offer a balance of what it is that we have to say and promote understanding of whomever our readers are.
The comment that I made was just simply to point out that there are indeed differences between what can be ADE policy changes versus statutory changes. And, Ms. Marshall, your point, because this is a public document, there are a lot of, there have been misunderstandings before about what the board can do, what the department can do, issues surrounding moratoriums on charter schools and other subjects in that realm that simply aren't within the purview of the commissioner's office or the state board. And it was simply to, so that as you all finish this document, that there be recognition of the difference. What is statutory, what is in rules, regulation. And so, yes, we will, Ms. Freno is out, but I think Ms. Davis will be able to help me with that and pretty quickly be able to get that feedback to you all so that you won't be waiting on us for anything.
That'd be great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay.
So the agreement is that we will be able to communicate electronically if need be, and that we're going to see each other face to face
Not.
at the board meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
I think there's nothing that prevents us, once we turn the document over to Ms. Kaufman on the 26th, if we feel the need to get together between then and the board meeting to talk about presentation or things that we want to emphasize, then we have an opportunity to do that.
Correct.
I can also set up a conference call if you need one.
Okay.
If you just let me know ahead of time. I will be on vacation the week of the 22nd at an undisclosed location.
Not Florida, we take it.
I'm not telling.
No rendezvous. Are we envisioning an executive summary?
Well, if there's time, that might be nice. I'm thinking there's not going to be time.
Okay. Cynthia will do that for us, won't she? After the fact.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A second.
Second.
So moved. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I get to my meeting. Great. Thank you. My concert thing.